if you don't mind, I'll walk through the bill very quickly, explain what we're doing, and then I'll give sort of the backstory of why this is important to us. This essentially grants easements on some acquiesced lands. You look in the first paragraph, VMRC gets to set the conditions for granting those easements, and those that has to be approved by both the Attorney General and the Governor before that can be granted to a political subdivision. They can only be made to a political subdivision of the Commonwealth, so it can't be the individuals, it can't be businesses. And that political subdivision has to be acting in the capacity of an official, non-federal sponsor in accordance with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Again, very important aspect of it because that means they have to have actual money in the game. And then the most important aspect of this is of a federally authorized civil works project. I'll tell you why that is important. We've been working to get a federally authorized project is at least a three-step process. The first step is to identify the projects that need to be done. The second part of that process is congressional approval of the project. And the third part of that process is the actual authorization. So before any easement can be granted, any grant lands or bottom lands can be given, it has to have the congressional approved project, and the federal government has to agree to put federal dollars on that project. What this is about is coastal flooding in the Hampton Roads area, our efforts to adaptation to that coastal flooding. So before we can build natural shoreline to fight flooding, before we can put up a seawall, before we can put up a floodgate, we need to have access to the bottomlands so they can do that. We just finished the first step of that three-step process. Norfolk just completed what was called the 3x3x3 study performed by the Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps of Engineers identified $1.6 billion worth of projects that need to be done in Norfolk alone. Virginia Beach is following on with its authorization study shortly thereafter. We'll be seeing it from Newport News, Hampton, Pocosin, Chesapeake, and Suffolk as well. Again, the $1.6 billion is just in Norfolk projects. So before we can move forward with this project, we need to take and get federal approval and authorization. The Army Corps of Engineers, to us, has said, we've done the first step, we're ready to move to the next step. They need to have our buy-in so that they know that they can get access to the bottomlands to actually do this project moving forward. There's been concern raised about this bill and that the Army Corps came and asked for legislation. This is actually the language that they brought. It probably would have been better if they'd worked through the administration initially. There's also concern that there hasn't been enough conversations with the Army Corps on this. We were scheduled for a meeting with the Army Corps the first week in February. If this committee approves this bill moving forward, if the Army Corps says we need this language this year in order to move forward with approval and authorization of funding for these federally sponsored programs, then we will have a bill in place, a mechanism to do that. If at the meeting the first week of February they say there's not a rush, nothing's going to happen until the next cycle, I will pull this bill so that it doesn't move forward until after we've had further discussions with the Army Corps. The Army Corps bringing this to us indicates to me at least that there is at least some amount of need to expedite our process and making sure that we get in line to get access to money for these projects that need to be done.
For interest's sake, are these like 100% federal funding?
No, they're not. So it's usually 65-35. So, and again, the $1.6 billion will be projects that are done over perhaps a 10 to 15 year time frame.
Mr. Chairman, do we have any say over the nature of the, what do you say, structure or whatever it is that we're going to do to stop the erosion? What I mean essentially is that are we going to go to concrete barriers or are we going to natural sources?
I think that's a great question, and the answer is it depends. So it's going to depend on what what the particular area is. So if you're looking primarily at beachfront, or if you're looking primarily at riverfront, that may be a natural shoreline. It may be sand replenishment that we do that. If you're looking at downtown Norfolk that is built up, it's probably going to be a seawall. If you look at Pretty Lake, where it has tidal flooding that comes in and floods out folks' homes because of the tidal flooding, it's probably going to be a floodgate that we put in there. Each one of those is going to need access to bottomlands. They will need the easement to take and move forward with those projects.
Mr. Chairman, I would say too, the degree to which we have a say in how that works, because I think some research now suggests that the natural sources, the rebuilding dunes and so on, actually turn to be more effective.
Absolutely, and we do have say, we do work very closely with the Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps of Engineers is very engaged in making sure that we get the right projects in the right places. I think you'll hear the cities talk to this as well, that they've been engaged all along with these projects and work very closely with the Army Corps of Engineers.
More questions from the committee?
I think there are a lot of people that want to talk.
If you're hungry, I can, let's have comments in support of the bill.
Hi, good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. Morgan Whalen from the City of Norfolk, and Delegate Slaughter's absolutely correct in his description. The City of Norfolk has been working with Army Corps of Engineers over the last 3 or plus more years, specifically on this study. As the delegate mentioned, it's a 3x3x3. It's 3 years, 3 levels of review, $3 million. The city has paid $1.5 million for this study. To date, the study's completely funded just by the city and federal government, and for that we spent millions of dollars on studies to inform this study. It is going to, the Army Corps study, essentially what it is, it's a list of projects that we can implement over time. It is structural and non-structural based on the land, so areas in downtown would be a wall, other areas we're looking at green infrastructure and berms. We've been working with our federal delegation for years again to try to push. Our goal is to bring as much federal money as we can to Virginia and Norfolk to help solve this challenge that we have in the future as we work to protect our coastal city. Again, happy to answer any questions, but we thank the delegate for moving this forward. We've had a great relationship with him and the Army Corps as we try to move from studying to implementation.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure that I'm capturing the intent. Is it the intent that that the state convey authority to the local government to oversee a federal / civil project? Is that what's happening now?
It's not giving authority to oversee the project, it's giving the easement for the project to the locality. So what the federal government doesn't want to be doing is getting into negotiation with each leaseholder on bottomlands there. So that would draw out the process a great deal. So what this does is it says that for these projects on conditions set by VMRC, approved by the governor and attorney general, that those can go to the city. If the easement is not used, they have to go back. The city can't convey them to somebody else, to a third party. They come back to the state as state-owned bottomlands.
Mr. Chair, a follow-up question. And this is something that the city would want to do and not be forced to do in any way over the course of time.
I guarantee you the cities want
I'm
to do
just
this
double
very
checking.
badly.
Yeah, okay, it's not, I'm just looking for the intent, it's really, it's not mandating, it's more because
It requires local involvement to even get to this point. They have a number of hoops.
Just a lot of words, and so.
Yeah.
Anyone else in the audience like to speak in favor? Does anyone in the audience like to speak in opposition?
Mr. Chairman, Steve Bowman of the Marine Resources Commission. While I'm not in opposition to the bill, the administration has no position on the bill. I've talked with Delegate Stoley about our concerns. We share Delegate Stoley's dedication of improving coastal Virginia's resilience to sea level rise, flooding, and other natural hazards. As primary stewards of the public interest in submerged lands of the Commonwealth, we take your job very seriously. If you note, the Marine Resources Commission is mentioned in line 4 of the bill. This legislation was brought to the Marine Resources Commission to the administration's attention less than a week ago and was not developed with consultation with the Marine Resources Commission. We understand now that the bill originated with the United States Army Corps of Engineers, and have scheduled an initial meeting with them the first week in February, so they can explain to us the specific needs of the bill. We're optimistic that through collaboration with the Corps and other stakeholders, that we can find an appropriate combination of administrative actions and the necessary legislative proposals to address the legitimate concerns. We also know that the stakeholders that we deal with also have some legitimate concerns as well. So I just bring this to your attention that we would like to have been party to this. We work very closely with the Corps of Engineers on other matters, and the bill was somewhat of a surprise to both the Marine Resources Commission, as I said, contained on line 4, and the administration. I can answer any questions you may have.
I would comment that this was sent before session started to the administration.
So when you mention other stakeholders with whom you work,
Yes,
or
sir.
having concern, who are those stakeholders?
They're here and they wish to speak.
Oh, that answered my question.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anyone else in the audience like to speak in opposition?
Yes, sir. My name is Mike Osterling. I'm the Executive Director of Shellfish Growers of Virginia. We are indeed opposed to this bill. Delegate Scully mentioned that it is for coastal flooding. We recognize the need for the protection and coastal properties. However, nowhere in the bill does it say coastal flooding. It says projects. That allows any federal project to be used under this bill, whether it be a dredging project, which we just have had several discussions about, including a work group sponsored by the Secretary of Natural Resources that worked out compromises. So we feel that the wording is a little ambiguous as to what exactly the projects are. Additionally, this amounts to a taking of a piece of property that could be removed from the Commonwealth permanently. If you look at item 3 under A, it proposes a fee simple title transfer to the Army Corps. Okay. Also, there's really no opportunity for a leaseholder to object, to have his side of the story heard when a piece of property is being appropriated without his approval. There are some pieces of property grounds that are very productive and could cause great economic damage to that person. So we like the idea of having a meeting to pull the bill and then study it through the summer, the way the Secretary's work group worked to identify the user conflicts primarily in the Lynn Haven. Thank you very much. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is A.J. Erskine, with Coward Seafood, Evans Oyster Company in the northern neck of Virginia. We actively lease ground from the Commonwealth to propagate shellfish. And I heard the city provide testimony, as well as Delegate Stolley, that there's been a lengthy process and discussions with stakeholders. As an industry member, we heard about this on January 8th. So we were never part of any of the discussions, and we feel that we do have an interest in this. The City of Norfolk has in particular interest in some of the money coming to them for these projects. But the Army Corps is just not in Norfolk. It's in the Great Wacomico. It's probably one of the most productive rivers and tributaries in the state of Virginia. Produces tremendous number of oysters privately, as well as a number of sanctuaries. We lease grounds from the Commonwealth, from James River up until some of the Potomac River tributaries. We're actively propagating shellfish each and every year. So something like this that is just a blanket taking of ground has us tremendously concerned. I share the commissioner concerns that there should have been a broader stakeholder process put in place. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Kim Husky. I'm with Ballard Fish and Oyster, Cherrystone Aqua Farms on the eastern shore of Virginia. We share the concerns of our other industry counterparts and the commissioner. We were all part of the Secretary of Natural Resources work group, some over this fall that dealt with user conflicts, and this seems to be also a user conflict, whereas we appreciate the gravity of the nature of the Army Corps projects, we are opposed to this bill.
Thank you. Anyone else? Like to speak in opposition? Yeah, stop.
Mr. Chairman, no one's actually come to me with these concerns. I'd heard about them. I think that the concern about the Civil Works project is a valid concern, and I would be more than happy to add the words due to coastal flooding or sea level rise.
What line?
That would be on line 22. And so that specifies more clearly that this is associated with coastal flooding. It's certainly not our intention in any way to impact anyone's livelihood. But I would also indicate that City of Norfolk has 260,000 citizens. Virginia Beach has 450,000 citizens. This impacts their livelihood and their lives if we don't start to address these issues. So I'm happy to add that language if that would make it more palatable. Additionally, the concern about public input and the leaseholders' input, line 4 or under A, VMRC sets the conditions. So the leaseholders have the opportunity to appear before VMRC. VMRC can set the criteria of which any project conditions would be established. The third thing I would mention is I agree this was short-term. I received it short-term from the Army Corps of Engineers. And I don't know the timing of whether they got it to us because they need this quickly or not. The first week of February meeting will help identify that. If this is not something that's needed in this year, and we can bring it back next year, I will pull the bill. If this is something that the Army Corps says they need to move forward with congressional approval for projects, then I think we need to have a bill in place that we can be in a position to do that.
Would the clerk like to read the amendment proposed?
Mr. Chairman, I believe on line 21, after authorized civil works project, we could add related to coastal flooding or sea level rise.
Move that amendment.
Second. Motion second. Adopt the amendment. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Amendment 4. Or is there another amendment?
Yes, sir.
Is that, do you have industry or something?
That's takes care of one of our concerns, but not our total concerns, sir. Still would be in opposition.
Just for everyone's awareness, the 3x3x3 study is part of any federal process. We had public outreach over the last 3 years, and then when we get to the point when we have construction funding, all of these projects, because again, because they're federal money, will have to go through both a NEPA and an EIS. So those environmental concerns will be addressed as we get to the point of construction.
Do you have a motion?
Again, with an understanding, since we're a little subcommittee, we're not the end result. We've got full committee, we've got another house, and we've got finally the governor's action. So I can appreciate the frustration that people feel from the late notice, and I don't think anybody purposely notified anybody late. It's just how some of these things work out. But there's time, it seems to me like along the way, as this makes its way through, we can figure out whether it's a real need this year or whether it needs to be further away on for another year.
And Delegate Plum makes a good point. So there's a lot more bites at the apple that could happen as we go through forward this process, including not least of which is full committee. But, we do have a motion to report as amended. House Bill 430 now.
We're not having any more meetings at this subcommittee.
Plan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, vote on the board. 5-1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Now, for the benefit of the committee, I am going to suspend for